What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and recently Xbox had a showcase of games that was actually pretty good, all things considered. There was a variety of titles shown, however, I couldn't help but notice as I watched that some of these trailers that the women, especially, almost unanimously across the board, they were ugly, deliberately on purpose. What the hell is happening exactly in the modern gaming industry? So let's talk about Dragon Age, Perfect Dark, Star Wars The Acolyte news later on, and some other stuff. To start, let's go with Dragon Age, cause I got a real burning opinion on all of this. In case you don't know, Dragon Age Dreadwolf is now called the Veilguard, which is not a good title change. At the very least, they should have named it Dragon Age Veilguard. But beyond this already eyebrow-raising change came the very first actual trailer for the game showcasing its companions. And pretty much every single companion is some form of diversity checklisting of some kind, from a brown woman with mechanical legs which checks the person of color and disabled boxes, an Asian elf woman who looks like they got modern audience in the face, a black elven grey warden, and even an old white guy necromancer. Look, I'm going to be real with you guys like always. I've been a lifelong Dragon Age fan. I've 100%ed Origins on the Xbox 360 back in the day, and I've played that a dozen times. I beat Dragon Age 2 a few times too, and I've platinumed Inquisition on PS4. I love the Dragon Age series, and this trailer, with my whole chest, I will say this, it made me feel absolutely nothing but sheer apathy. I didn't recognize the world that I grew up with whatsoever when I saw this trailer. Comparing this to the early Dragon Age games, it felt more like I was watching a Marvel Fortnite crossover event for Dragon Age than anything else. Like, if this was a trailer for Fortnite bringing Dragon Age characters into their world, I would be totally fine with it because that's the vibe that I got from this. Everything was looking cartoonish and very goofy, over-exaggerated even, if you will, at times. It does look like Dragon Age Inquisition concept art that was brought to life, and I felt like everything in the trailer was heavily influenced by the designs of those tarot cards in Inquisition. If you've never played that game, each companion had a set of cards that changed based on their relationship to the main character. They were very visually striking, and each card had this over-exaggerated, almost whimsical look, which was fine by the way. But it was a stylistic choice that didn't actually influence the art style of the world, and in my opinion, the way Inquisition looked, as in its characters, worlds, and enemies, was a direction that I liked the series going in. It had a very slight cartoony-esque slant to its design, but it was very subtle. Like, it was slightly stylized in order to differentiate it from, say, Skyrim or anything else at the time. Witcher 3, for example, it came out a year after Inquisition 2. But it still looked realistic-esque, and I really dug that look a lot. I also just don't find the cast here of Veilguard to be very visually interesting at all to me either. And that it comes down to a few things, which is one, yes, the art style change, but also the fact that the entire cast just looks like that they were made for a modern audience. Speaking of that, I want to show you another game that kind of also proves what I'm saying that was shown in the same showcase. So we also have the Perfect Dark reboot coming, and gameplay wise, I would say the game actually looks fun, like a cool mix of Perfect Dark meets Dishonored meets Deus Ex. I have no qualms with the actual gameplay that was depicted. Everything about the trailer was honestly getting me interested in this reboot until the game decided to show off the main character, which I immediately had Mary Jane Spider-Man 2 Vietnam flashbacks as soon as they showed it. This reveal immediately made me almost forget about everything else around it, and suddenly I started seeing in pretty much every trailer that Xbox was showing that they all had women in it from a Western studio standpoint anyways. I keep hearing the same phrase in my head over and over as I continue to watch. All of these games, these ugly women with their square jaws, vaguely feminine features, they were all being made for the modern audience. And I suddenly felt as I was watching a showcase showing games meant for players that I was no longer being shown stuff that was being meant to excite me in order to play them. I felt abandoned by everything that I was seeing, as if suddenly the entire industry had just evolved overnight into a new direction. That it had been slowly over time evolving like a caterpillar in a cocoon, but instead what emerged was an ugly, rancid future that made me more worried than anything else. The game industry has been overtaken by activists, we know this already, but in various ways it feels as if their agenda has been stemmed from time to time. And we keep having examples showing that their mindset and way of making things is not working. Remember that recently Warner Bros. Confirmed that Rocksteady has gone from being a premier game studio that made Batman Arkham games then following their Suicide Squad flop. They are now apparently a support studio that's helping Avalanche make a Hogwarts Legacy Director's Cut edition. You know how humiliating and pathetic it is to go from a studio that was considered the head of the publisher when it came to making things to being relegated to side support? But what can you expect when your terrible game lost over $200 million? Of course, recently Jason Schreier had an article about Suicide Squad flopping and he talked to the devs there anonymously. I read the whole thing, I won't read you his article, but to summarize it, pretty much the vision of Suicide Squad just kept changing behind the scenes. And the developer, who was known for single-player games like BioWare as well, was suddenly thrusted into making this always-online live service offering instead, which also happened to BioWare. I mean, go look at Anthem and how that all turned out. The problem here is that beyond women just being made ugly on purpose in games, which is apparently being done to avert the male gaze because they don't want to cater to men anymore, which is insane to me because the majority of the people who buy and play games are men, just kind of already tells you that we are out of alignment here. None of this shit is going to work well at all. I mean, beyond the perfect dark with a Crimson Shin job protagonist, we also have the travesty in Dragon Age with that Kunari companion. I kid you not, I showed my girlfriend the Kunari companion and she thought it was a man. We are cooked, dude. If women like my girlfriend can't even properly identify something as their own sex, what are we even doing here, guys? Like, really? You know things are messed up when Baldur's Gate 3 looks more like Dragon Age than Dragon Age itself. The series was always a gritty dark fantasy RPG. I mean, if you go back to the original trailers for Origins, the game was marketed as a dark fantasy. It even had Marilyn Manson music playing in the background. I look at this new trailer, and I don't recognize Dragon Age anymore. The irreversible damage that the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Fortnite has had on the entire spectrum of entertainment as a medium, it needs to be studied. Because everything is going for this hyper-stylized look now. Valorant, Overwatch, Fortnite, Apex, you name it, they're all going for this. And now single-player RPG games are trying to chase the people who like those sorts of styles with their games. And all it's doing is alienating the fans who've been waiting, mind you, 10 goddamn years for a proper new Dragon Age game. I also talked to my BioWare contact about all of this. This contact has worked on both the Mass Effect trilogy and the Dragon Age games. And they told me that they found internally that every Dragon Age game that had been made always had new creative leads and art directors. And apparently every art director wanted to put their own spin on the next Dragon Age. This is why every game in this series has a slight variation in its artistic look. I mean, just look at Dragon Age 2 compared to Inquisition. They look very different. Actually, Veilguard looks a lot like Dragon Age 2 the more I look at it, which is not a good thing, mind you, because DA2 is considered to be easily the worst game in the series, which I agree with. My contact told me that most of BioWare, even to this day, are people who just keep their opinions to themselves just in order to keep their jobs. And most of them don't say what they really think because they would likely be fired if they spoke out, which already tells me that BioWare likely has a very small minority of people who oversee and control everything with a precision knife, which is not a good thing, mind you. Also, according to my contact, Matt Goldman is now the creative director for Dragon Age, who took over from another guy named Neil Thompson before. So each game is like a dick measuring contest for whoever is in charge pretty much. My contact also confirmed that BioWare was pushing for DEI even back during the Inquisition days. Although according to them, BioWare was not as hell-bent about these things like they are now, but they did tell me that Mike Gamble, the director of the next Mass Effect game, is actually pretty based in private and also doesn't have his pronouns listed in his bio on Twitter, which as of the making of this video anyway, he doesn't. So Mass Effect, at the very least, is being led by someone that according to my contact is not 100% with the DEI stuff, and might actually be a real game developer that wants to make a great game. But in Dragon Age's case, the game director there is a transgender person named Corinne Bush. Remember, Corinne said this via the BioWare blog back in 2022, and I quote, "As a queer trans woman, I have a perspective on the games that not everyone has. Dragon Age has long been a place where LGBTQIA+ folks can see people like themselves represented respectfully. It's inherently very queer, and it's such a rare thing for marginalized communities to have representation where we feel proud and powerful in how we are depicted. It's so deeply meaningful for so many. I often get emotional when I think about what it'd have meant for a younger version of myself to see someone like her in a game and as a hero no less. I hope we can be a safe space for our queer players to know they are not alone and they are brilliant and worthy, and that they are not only welcome but celebrated. Game directors are sometimes thought of as big personalities who are singularly responsible for the purity of their creative vision. But for me, it's really about being a steward for the vision that we as a team have collectively defined. I get a high-level view of everything as it's coming together and can steer the project as it does. But ultimately, it's about empowering people to work together, play with ideas, offer critiques, and make decisions, all to help create a cohesive experience for the player. In Dragon Age Veilguard, you can be who you want to be, explore the possibilities and consequences of your choices, and build relationships that leave a lasting impression. Few games give players that kind of autonomy while also weaving such a rich narrative. I think it really speaks to why our players feel so invested in this world." End quote. Look, as someone who's played these games multiple times over, Dragon Age never felt like an inherently queer game whatsoever. I would never personify the series that way. If asked, I would say Dragon Age was always a dark fantasy series with mature concepts. I would not describe any fantasy series, in my opinion, as inherently queer at all, even Baldur's Gate, Skyrim, or Witcher. The only reason this game director believes Dragon Age is inherently queer is because they are queer themselves. That's really all it is. And yeah, you could have queer relationships in Dragon Age games, but I would wager the large majority of the player base, which includes me, stuck to heterosexual relationships with the characters. For example, in Origins, I only ever romanced either Liliana or Morrigan. I also never played a female character. Like many of you, I played the gold standard. I played a straight white male warrior with a big ass sword. That was my character in Origins. Also, I played the same character in Inquisition, but of course people will have varying opinions and believe based on who they are, but no, I've never seen Dragon Age as inherently queer. This is clearly someone who played the game a way that they wanted, and then they framed the entire series and concepts around their beliefs and ideas. Therefore, that's why Veilguard is what it is today. It is being made in an echo chamber. It seems, especially according to my contact. I mean, just go back to that older Dragon Age dev diary from years ago and you can see all the telltale signs there. The studio has largely been infiltrated and shepherded towards becoming another woke-infested DEI studio like Rocksteady. Maybe BioWare as a whole doesn't believe that and thinks what I'm saying is wrong. However, everything they've done here and shown has proven the otherwise. Remember that a reveal trailer is the studio giving people a first look at what the vision for their game is, which means Veilguard's reveal is what Veilguard is, of course. And the response to this trailer has been nothing but bad. The game's trailer has been ratioed into oblivion in terms of its like versus dislike ratio. Currently, it's around 12% liked compared to the jaw-dropping 88% dislike ratio. Jesus. I mean, you can even see posts on social media clowning on BioWare like this person who said, "I did it. We all needed this after that Dragon Age trailer, sorry not sorry." Which shows a guy dropping Baldur's Gate 3 back into his eyeballs to clean the garbage he just saw. And yeah, I agree. This trailer doesn't look like Dragon Age, and mind you, this dislike ratio is not because they showed two men kissing or anything else in a trailer. The Veilguard reveal simply showed the main characters with a really awful song overlaying all of it. Seriously, whoever chose the music in this trailer should be fired, because what the fresh hell was even that music choice? This response is becoming far more prevalent in today's world. I mean, Xbox also had trailers for stuff like South of Midnight, which by the way is a confirmed Sweet Baby Inc. game. I explained a few months back that when it was revealed that devs who worked there leaked that the game had been changed by Kim Belair, the co-founder of Sweet Baby, and that the original main character was a white girl. Here's the character model for that original design, by the way. And the game is being made in Quebec, Canada, and according to leaks, the studio devs were not comfortable making a game about voodoo magic and southern bioaesthetics because obviously Quebec is the furthest thing from that. And actually, this, according to insiders, led to many devs abandoning South of Midnight, and those same leaks said that Kim Belair and the upper management weeded out anybody who didn't agree with the direction. And now, as you can see with the gameplay reveal of Midnight, the game is now starring a black protagonist in the bayou while using voodoo magic, which again, was not the original plan. Actually, the majority of the trailers shown that didn't go over well all had one thing in common, which was diverse female protagonists. Fable also had a trailer with the same main character that everyone made fun of, and here they seem to have cleaned her up a little and made her not as ugly, but it's definitely still the same face model. And funnily enough, the trailers that went over the best for the entire internet are the ones that featured male protagonists. Gears of War has a new prequel game called E-Day, and it stars a younger Marcus Phoenix, and that trailer and review went over super well with the fan base. Everyone seemed hyped for it, and that's great. Then of course there's Doom the Dark Ages, also went over really well, and big surprise, it has a white male protagonist in it also. And you can't even say it's biased, because these two trailers were well received by what seems like the entire internet, so all echo chambers, all walks of life, ideologies, religions, whatever. And yet the only trailers people don't like unanimously were, like I said, the ones with diverse female protagonists. They also keep pushing these ugly female characters down our throats, hoping if they flood the market with these games eventually they will do great and sell well and be accepted. But honestly, I don't think any of that will work, and it's like what Grum said before, just don't buy their stuff for 2 years, play your backlogs, and eventually they will have to give you what you want. And I think that's what's going to happen here. To be honest with you, I don't see South of Midnight being a huge release because nobody seems hyped for that game at all. Fable just looks dead on arrival already. Perfect Dark is just giving us another ugly female lead with a huge ass chin. And then there's Dragon Age 2. There was this one tweet that kind of puts the bow on all of this really nicely too, which reads, "People are complaining that this isn't the most attractive woman ever. Have these people ever actually seen a woman? So what? She doesn't look like a cis female. That's not important. She's a woman." And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. The activism mask falls off and you see exactly what these devs and fans are going for. So what if none of the women in any of these trailers look like cis, as in biologically born women? As long as they look like women, which by their definition includes anyone who identifies as a woman, then it's fine. And this user even just admitted that the Perfect Dark reboot made the main character a trans-looking woman instead of an actual woman, and that's okay according to them. This all keeps confirming what that one Naughty Dog artist leaked months ago. Apologies, I couldn't find the original version of this source because it was originally on sausageroll.com, but as you can see here, it is now deleted. But thankfully someone on VG Charts posted what this anonymous Naughty Dog developer was saying in their article, so we still kind of have it technically. And pretty much, once Amy Hennig, who made Uncharted, left Naughty Dog, the entire studio just drank the Kool-Aid and went full DEI woke diversity to the 10th degree. Here's what that now deleted Sausage Roll article said, and I will be combining their words alongside the supposed Naughty Dog dev that said stuff as well, and I quote, "It is also interesting to note that Amy Hennig's departure from Naughty Dog happened shortly after the release of The Last of Us Left Behind, which featured the lesbian romance between two underage teen girls. These coincidences have led people to believe that Hennig may not have entirely agreed with the whole gender politics narrative, and ultimately that was the reason she was fired. The Naughty Dog source did confirm that there were people who questioned the progressive narrative that Naughty Dog are injecting into their games are at high risk of losing their jobs. The team is very much divided on the game, The Last of Us Part 2, and even voicing your concerns on its story will upset certain individuals. It usually results in said person being called closed-minded or even phobic or some such nonsense. Some people literally have to bite their tongues or fear losing their jobs, even careers, to an outrage mob. That's not all. The characters in The Last of Us Part 2 are designed in such a way to not make trans people feel uncomfortable. Every single new character introduced in the sequel does not have definitive female or masculine qualities. Ellie and Dina specifically have been remodeled to look less feminine. It even seems as if Ellie has completely changed since they first revealed her in The Last of Us Part 2. We spoke to a seasoned artist who has worked as a character designer for several AAA games, and he admitted that this is the new norm. It's not really about sexual objectification of women, he explained. Women, like men, come in all shapes and sizes, so to say that big busty women is unrealistic is untrue. He added, this is only true for trans people. A trans woman can't naturally grow large breasts, and not all trans people can afford implants. If you see a game where the women are a little less curvy, it's not because the game designers are worried about receiving backlash for sexualizing women. It's because they are worried about offending the trans community. From a design standpoint, this is a really challenging problem. I've had many board meetings about how to tackle this. Trans people want realistic representation in our games, but they feel excluded if they are represented as too masculine or too feminine. That's why you will see a lot of designers nerfing the female form, so to speak, so that the difference between trans women and cis women is a little less noticeable, end quote. And as you can see, this is all happening because it is part of the plan. I've said in previous videos that devs making female and male characters nerf to appease trans players only fails everyone because they're saying trans players can only be seen if characters are ugly on purpose. Which just shows that these devs inherently believe that trans people are ugly and therefore think ugly characters is adequate representation for them. Too long didn't read version, developers and publishers are failing everyone by going down this route. You made the female characters ugly, which alienates the female players, you made the male characters weak and frumpy, which alienates the male players, and you make everyone look androgynous, big-chinned, and vaguely both genders, but you also just end up failing the trans players too. And what we're left with is products that nobody wants to buy or support, play, or even look at because these things are being made for absolutely nobody at all. And that, my friend, is what it really means when they say it's being made for a modern audience. If anything, this Xbox showcase has proven to me that within the Western studio world anyways, that I'm not crazy and this agenda is being pushed so goddamn hard, and they're really trying to make it the norm. So many of these new game reveals had women of diversity as main characters, all of whom are ugly as sin. And yet the internet and world at large, which isn't 100% white or male by the way, they all seem to only be accepting of games that feature strong white male protagonists. So even when your fan bases that aren't fully white or male are liking and celebrating the games that aren't what they are, you're left in a very precarious spot. Dragon Age does not look good at first glance. Perfect Dark got modern audience to hell, South of Midnight is going to flop, and Fable is just doubling down on freckled weird girl because they know if they don't, their colleagues will crucify them. And the only positive reactions came from a Gears of War prequel that had a white guy as the hero and Doom, which featured Doom Guy. Which proves more than anything else that this industry is desperately trying to change the perceived conceptions of the players, and they are being rejected, my guy, like hard, dude, and I love to see it. And before this video ends, let's also quickly look at some Star Wars news which actually coincides into everything else and kind of proves what I was saying. This is from That Park Place and it's titled, Financial analysts call Star Wars The Acolyte's global viewership pathetic and explains that only about 3% of Disney subscribers actually watched it. Yeah, you heard that right. The Acolyte, according to Disney, is their most successful debut of 2024. And only 3% of their entire audience that is subscribed to Disney Plus actually watched it. So what does that mean, dear viewer? Valiant Renegade, who's a friend of the channel, went into this more. He said, and I quote, First of all, the views themselves. Remember, there were only 2 episodes. We're talking about total runtime between what just the first episode or both episodes. We don't know. They didn't stipulate and come with a viewership total. The other part of the issue is that 4.8 million views does not stipulate from where or from what market that was derived. And when it comes to Disney Plus, if we go by what they've said in the post, when they report Disney Plus numbers for things like The Acolyte or for things like Ahsoka, they're talking about global views. They're talking about Disney Plus with its nearly 150 million subscriber reach around the globe. That means that basically less than 3% of all Disney Plus subscribers tuned in that Tuesday night to watch The Acolyte. They don't stipulate US like we know when we read reports from places like Nielsen or even Samba TV. But it actually gets worse. What other major competition has there been in terms of a series premiere on Disney Plus since January 1st of 2024? There's actually only one, and that was Marvel's Echo. Not sure they had other things like X-Men 97, but we're talking about small potatoes kind of shows or just shows that were very poorly received. So I don't know how beating these other animated series or very bad Marvel series that nobody watched is this really something to tout that so far with virtually nothing else out there on the platform to speak of, in terms of premiere since the beginning of the year that we're going to have a throw party for this one. House of the Dragon, much like The Acolyte, is a very large budget show, 200 million or so in that range at least so far as to what we know. But let's look at what the actual viewership looks like for a seriously big hit show. Following the season or series premiere, I should say, of House of the Dragon, they had 10 million viewers. 10 million, twice as much as what Disney is reporting, but it also gets worse. The premiere of House of the Dragon drew 9.9 million viewers across linear, that's via cable and HBO Max streaming platforms in the US Sunday night. House of the Dragon turned in twice as much viewership as The Acolyte, in that case, just in the US alone. The Acolyte's numbers, again, if Disney is reporting in any consistency whatsoever, they're giving us total Disney Plus views, and that's in the first 24 hours. 4.8 million views for The Acolyte globally in its first day, its first 24 hours or so on the platform, versus 10 million views for the series premiere of House of the Dragon within a couple of hours on Sunday night. I think this show with that kind of word of mouth is going to struggle to get up to where Ahsoka was at 14 million. Again, global views in its first 6 days or 5 days or whatever it may have been, it doesn't matter. It's really not that impressive, and it's not that impressive because of what Disney spends on this, end quote. So like I've been saying with the games this whole video, and now as Valiant described with Star Wars, the modern audience is just not there, guys. It isn't there. There's only the audience that's always been here, you and me, and we are clearly not the targeted demographic anymore for any of this stuff. But the problem for these companies is that there isn't an audience to replace us that is adequately big enough in order to foster and support these things properly either. So they're making shit for nobody that is doing abysmally bad, and they're celebrating any amount of pennies they find on the ground as a success. The modern audience does not exist, and these companies are burning and panicking because they know they're just racing to the bottom of the barrel. But they're unwilling to change their trajectories because they know if they admit they're wrong, they'll get eviscerated by their woke colleagues. The entertainment medium is fully invested in DEI, but it looks to me anyway that it's more like DIE. And dear viewer, they are panicking that you aren't accepting the sludge, which good on you by the way for having a backbone. None of this is going to work. I say let them push it. I think the ultimate end goal here is that places like BioWare will end up closing for good if Veilguard flops. And Star Wars has already been suffering from diminishing returns upon diminishing returns. They're currently at the stage where they're trying to survive off the diminishing returns of returns like 5 returns ago at this point. How much longer until they can't do this anymore? I don't know, but if you're like me, I ain't gonna help none of them when they ask for help as they're drowning. I'll just pop open a cold one and wave as they sink into the bottom of the lake. After all, if I'm not the audience anymore, why should I save you? Let them sink is what I say, and remember friends, 2 years. Just wait 2 years, play your backlogs, they can't do this forever. And as always, thank you for watching, subscribe, share, and like the video. Let me know what you think as always too. Thanks to my patrons as well, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.